and welcome to Dregs of Wisdom with Andrew Tanner.
Hey, welcome to Dregs of Wisdom. It's been a little bit. I'm sorry it's been a while. I was getting a yoga festival off the ground, BerkshireYogaFestival.com. Check it out. We're going to be coming back next year with over 1,000 people. Super excited and hope many of you will join us there. But what I wanted to share with you today was just some dregs of wisdom that I've been noodling on. And it starts with this idea from Taoism about inner power and making what's called Zheng Shim, or like a true mind, pure mind. And in the Taoist tradition, your mind is your heart. In fact, a better translation would be heart mind for the word Shim. I think in the West, we think of the mind as being our brain, but in the East, they understand that the thoughts of the brain are mostly rationalizations for the feelings of the heart. And I know we actually know this now with psychology that, if you think about it like this, your thoughts, you don't control them. They kind of come in, they go. You can't decide what thought you're going to have, but you can do certain actions. You can take certain steps. You can make certain choices that over time change the feeling in your heart or the affective state in your heart. And then different thoughts come depending on those feelings in your heart. And so the Taoists have always known that the first principle of personal cultivation is Zheng Shim, or true heart, cultivating the heart mind of the Taoist. And I think what's missing right now in this world is that people don't know how to cultivate their heart mind. First of all, I'll give you a little hint. We don't cultivate the mind, the heart mind, by taking in information. Like right now, you're listening to me talk, and that's great. But I hope when you're done listening to me talk, you shut this off and you actually listen to yourself talk for a little bit and you have a conversation with yourself. The best talks, when we listen to them from teachers, are ones that force us to have a conversation with ourselves. When you are listening to, teachers on YouTube or people in the world sharing their ideas, if listening to them is causing you to have a quiet conversation with yourself, then that can lead to a cultivation of Zheng Shim, a cultivation of true mind. Because it's in that inner conversation that you actually get clarity of what you really feel and believe about things. Or you get clarity about your lack of clarity on a certain thing. I think there's people who have clarity about an issue because they've just accepted it. This is like the religious convert, someone who believes something because their parents believe it or their friends believe it, and they want to be part of that community. And so they really believe it. And in fact, sometimes the people who are the most adamant about a certain belief and really want everyone else to believe what they believe, they're doing it from the deepest place of wanting to belong, instead of actually having a sense of self that thinks about the concept and agrees with the idea and has a set of principles and has connection to Zheng Shim, to true mind. The other kind of people who have total clarity are people who have had the quiet conversations with themselves and they have a true sense of what they believe to be true, so much so that they could die for that idea, because the connection to what they believe is based on their actual experience. And when you have a deep connection to your own actual experience, going against it creates a great pain. And what Taoists call going against the Tao, going against the way of nature, going against nature's will. All of us are these consciousness, really one consciousness that has been placed into an individual meat sack, into this individual little consciousness. And we can listen in to that inner intelligence. That inner intelligence is experiencing the world through the body, mind, and identity that you have, that I have. And it's taking in information and it's making little judgments. It's just making one judgment. It's making yes or no. It's making the judgment of, am I moving towards the good or am I moving away from the good? Am I moving towards or away a certain thing? And that is what the heart mind is constantly doing. And then our brain mind, or this whole experience of the body, is reacting to that. And so, unfortunately, this is why so many people feel disempowered. They feel disconnected. People feel unsure. People are quick to anger. They're instantly getting into fights with their friends about this political belief or that spiritual idea or this or that. It's because they're not coming to it from a place of deep connection with Zheng Shim. Instead, they're experiencing the world with lots of layers over this true mind and a lot of confusion in their brain. And in the Taoist tradition, we call this the spirit, the Shen or the Shin, depending if it's Chinese or Korean. And so I want to share just some teachings that I've been reading lately from a book called the Nei Yei, or Inward Training. Sometimes it's called, translated as Original Tao. It's an older text than, say, the Tao Te Ching. Some people say this is the oldest Taoist text on internal alchemy practices. It dates back as early as the 3rd century BCE. And I find it pretty powerful. So I want to share a little bit from it and then talk a little more. So this is verse 20. Silent reflection generates wisdom. Idleness and carelessness generates worry. Cruelty and arrogance generate resentment. And worry and grief generate illness. When illness reaches a distressing degree, you die. When you think about something and don't let go of it, internally you will be distressed and externally you will be weak. Do not plan things out in advance, or else your vitality will seed in its dwelling. In eating, it's best not to fill up. In thinking, it's best not to overdo. Limit these to the appropriate degree, and you will naturally reach vitality. So it's interesting. This verse, it's very practical advice, right? It's very simple. But I'm always struck by this first line, which is silent reflection generates wisdom. I remember the first time I experienced what silent reflection was. I'll say this. I remember one of my teachers telling me I needed to reflect silently on, this was at a time when he was leaving and I was going to be working, by myself. And I was around 21 at the time, and I hadn't really had deep conversations with myself where I just reflected on life silently in my own mind, asking myself the big questions, listening for inner wisdom. I hadn't really done that before. Instead, I'd always been seeking wisdom in books. I'd always been seeking wisdom in teachers. And then I remembered that when I was, 12 years old, I would spend time in nature and sit and think about the world. And then I'd have memories of even being even younger and doing that. And I'm sure you have those memories too. There are these core times where you were left to your own devices. You didn't have one of these devices, most likely. Nowadays, kids sadly have these things way too early. And so you were hopefully able to listen to your own inner heart, your own true heart. And from that, wisdom comes. wisdom can't be given to someone. It can't be given to you. Like if I tell you what the truth of something is, you can't get wisdom from that. You can only get wisdom from your own actual experience. Because if you hear a great wisdom, it'll just go in one ear and out the other. Wisdom has to be generated through silent reflection, through actual connection with your own Zheng Shim. Sometimes when you are a yogi, when you're studying under a guru, you can get into a state of deep inner peace through practice and be sitting, and I have many experiences of this as well, just sitting deeply at peace, immersed in the teachings of the guru. And then sometimes wisdom can be transferred. In the yogic tradition, they call that diksha. When the guru imparts wisdom, they say it comes not just through the words, but through the eyes. And it's experienced as an insight. Scientifically, it might be that our brains are designed to have these things called mirror neurons, where when you're in the presence of a great teacher, your brain can, the neurons in your brain, these mirror neurons, they can sense the brain neurons of the brain of the teacher that you're focused on or learning from, and they can then mirror them. And so if the teacher is in a very deep, peaceful state, you can actually enter that same peaceful state. And when you enter that deep, peaceful state, there is a chance that you can experience wisdom, that you could have a silent conversation with yourself. And I think the best teachers are ones that help us have these experiences while we're, in a yoga class or at a workshop, etc. So that's the first line. Silent reflection generates wisdom. Idleness and carelessness generates worry. And it's weird when you think about this, that doesn't make sense on its face. How can idleness and carelessness generate worry? Isn't being idle and careless just not having a care? Why would that generate worry? And actually, I'm reminded of a saying that the founder of Amazon, Jeffrey Bezos, said. He said, anxiety, and I'm paraphrasing it, I'm just remembering this on the fly. He said something like, anxiety doesn't come from not knowing what to do. It comes from knowing what to do and not doing it. And in fact, when we have a mission, in the Taoist tradition, there's this belief that everyone has a purpose from heaven, and heaven being just the Tao itself, heaven being not like a Judeo-Christian concept of heaven, but that everyone has a mission from the heaven and earth. That's why they came into existence. And that when you cultivate yourself and you connect with Zheng Shim, true heart, you can connect with your path, whatever that is. And then when you follow that path, it brings great peace. But when you disregard that because you avoid it and you live a life of carelessness and idleness, constantly just trying to get more dopamine out of this thing and more information and more ways of feeling, some hit of feeling good, then we keep avoiding our soul's actual mission, and it creates a great amount of worry and a great amount of anxiety deep within you. And the other thing that happens when we become careless and idle is, instead of focusing on the things that are right in front of us, the things that, basic things that we should do, like the opposite of being careless and idle would be being mindful and in integrity. So cleaning your room, doing your dishes, doing all the basic stuff that's right in front of you. When you do the stuff that's right in front of you, it's very empowering. When you don't do those things, the mind automatically starts to dwell on things that are outside of your ability to influence. I mean, now in the modern world, when you're watching the news on this phone, it is constantly showing you a part of the world that you have very little control over. And when you focus on things that are outside of your circle of control, it's extremely disempowering. And this is why idleness and carelessness generates worry. And I would argue that it leads to cruelty and arrogance generating resentment. That's the next line. I see a lot, especially on the internet, of cruelty and arrogance. I think when we disconnect from our heart, it's so much easier to be cruel to others. It's so much easier to other people. And arrogance is the idea that you have the one true answer and that other people don't. And even if you have a good answer, here I am telling everyone what I think is a good answer. So I think I have a good answer too. But arrogance is when in communication, we don't try to listen to each other. And I see a lot of this happening as well in the world. And finally, worry and grief generate illness. So idleness and carelessness generate worry. Cruelty and arrogance generate resentment. And these two things, resentment and worry, it generates illness. And that's what's happening. Everyone is sick. Everyone is literally physically getting sick in the first world. We have an abundant world, but everyone's sick. Everyone's trying to mask their symptoms with pills because they're totally disconnected from the natural world. And when illness reaches a distressing degree, you die. Pretty simple. I would argue that this was written at a time where we didn't have modern methods of keeping people alive like zombies. But I was talking to a client the other day who said his doctor told him he's going to live to 100. And I said, well, is that a blessing or a curse? His doctor said, I got good news and bad news. The good news is you're going to live to 100. He's in his 50s, this person. And he said, it's good news and bad news because, how pleasant is it to live in a body until you're 100? And that's why he wanted to work with me, because the Taoist system is about longevity and about being able to enjoy your body by living in a more natural way. And so this verse from the Nei Yei is kind of explaining first where wisdom comes from, and then where all of this pain and suffering comes from that we're dealing with. And it then gives some suggestions. It says, do not plan things out in advance, or else your vitality will cede its dwelling. Now, when you think about something, let go of it. If you hold on to something, you'll become distressed and you'll become weak. Now, I don't think this is to mean that all of us should just give up everything we're doing and literally, become like wandering fools, wise fools, just letting every moment appear before us in the next moment and the next moment. Surely that is an option. And perhaps maybe one of you will be inspired to live in that way, and hopefully it will be helpful for you. But I think more realistically, if you just look at the role you're currently playing in the world, whatever job you have in the world, whatever roles you play as a mother, as a father, as a brother, as a sister, as an employee, or as an entrepreneur, whatever it is, you have some roles that you're playing. So you have some responsibilities, some things to do. Whenever you get into excessive planning, it causes a lot of stress. Instead, I like to recommend people do this directional planning. I call this planning from the Zheng Shim, from the true heart. Your heart, deep down, your intuition, it's always just pointing in a binary, like this way or that way. It's trying to tell you to move towards the good. And so if you're just thinking about things directionally, even in business, having like a North Star, when you go back to first principles about business or about life, then the application of those principles in the moment will become clear in the moment. And so it's not that you literally never make a plan about anything. You have to make a plan to create things in this world, but you can know in your plan what the direction is, and then it will continue to evolve as you go. The opposite of this is creating some plan and then sticking to it no matter what, every rule of the plan, even if it's going against the outcome that you actually want to achieve. And I think this happens a lot in business. It happens a lot in nonprofits. It happens a lot in government, where we create these extravagant plans that we're trying to figure out, and then the whole world changes. And so Taoism is really recommending that you think of the direction you want to move in life, and then allow the Tao to take its course. And I will add that if you're feeling anxious a lot and weak a lot, it could be because you're trying to overplan things. You're trying to, you're trying to hold on to a future that hasn't even come to be yet. You're attached to a future that doesn't even exist yet, and you're not allowing yourself to be present in the now. So we'll end with these last 4 lines. In eating, it's best not to fill up. Pretty practical advice. I will say that the Taoist advice on eating, it's, especially in the Samje Taoist tradition, what's recommended is that we don't advise people too much on specifics. We recommend, the Taoists mostly ate a bigu diet, which means a diet with very minimal grains or no grains. So kind of a gluten-free diet. And eating in a balanced way and never to fullness. So when you're eating like that, eating doesn't become the most important thing in the world. One of the problems in today's world is that eating has become such a sensual experience. And I'm not one to deny a great meal for sure. But we should realize that, when we're constantly trying to satisfy this sensory desire through eating, it's going to have some effects. And so if you're doing silent reflection, naturally, the wisdom about what to eat, and really it's more about how much to eat, will naturally happen for you. At least that's been my experience. In thinking, it's best not to overdo. Limit these 2 to the appropriate degree, and you will naturally reach vitality. So the final takeaway from this is silent reflection is the key. It generates wisdom. If your mind, when you try to silently reflect, is so full of crazy thoughts and unhelpful thoughts, then that's where a Taoist practice of actually learning to bring your consciousness into your dantian, your belly region, and to fill that area with energy, and to deepen your breath, and to do this physical practices, like I'm sure we'll link to some of my videos here. Those practices will help to draw the energy that's stuck in your head down so that your mind can actually experience silent reflection. Another great way to get silent reflection is to go walk in the woods for, as long as it takes, spending time in nature. So anyway, I hope this is helpful to you all, and I hope you'll consider after this video, well, first liking and subscribe, and I hope this video inspires you to turn your phone off and do some silent reflection. Thanks, everyone, and peace to you.